Welcome to the morning after. It is our first ever show. We've been teasing it for so long, and it's finally here. The morning after, brought to you by the Banter Broadcast. It is me, as always, Jonathan Silber, and my co-host for this specific show, Brandon Holkman. It is a pleasure to finally have, first of all, our first ever individual show together. This is really, really important to me because I feel like this is so much untapped potential with the banter that we have normally. And I feel like we needed to bring that to our audience. And by doing this, we are doing that. So we appreciate everybody who's tuning in. But as always, the morning after is a weekly show where we look through the past week of NFL and NBA games in the future, because the NBA is just around the corner. So make sure to stay tuned for that fantasy perspective as well. Brandon, this slate of games this Sunday was really interesting. The first set of games was kind of a snooze fest. We didn't really get that many fantasy breakout players in the early set of games. I know there were a handful, and we can go over some of those in a minute. But
Right.
there were a lot of booms in the later games. And I mean, some in the later games. The Steelers game was a little bust heavy as well. But definitely a lot of good players. What do you think are some bust players from this past weekend?
I think most notably, you could take a look at a guy like Chase Claypool. Just kind of singling him out because of him not doing so well on my fantasy team. I started him this week thinking like, oh,
I did the same thing because Juju was out.
Yeah, Juju's out. I think he's gonna get targeted a lot. I think
Seattle secondary is atrocious. I mean, they have
it's not
Jamal
yet.
Adams, but like there are so many holes on that defense.
Yeah, I don't think that they're doing well right now. Yeah, in the secondary, I figured that the Steelers are gonna have a lot of time in possession, given that Russ is injured. Can Geno Smith really provide a spark for this offense? It was interesting. So I would have to give it to Claypool as one of my busts for this week, just because I figured he was gonna get targeted a lot. I was wrong. I clearly wrong, but yeah, that was a little bit of a disappointment for me right there.
Let's go ahead and dive a little bit into that game because, as we all know, I'm a Steelers fan. All right.
Right.
And
right.
Let's step away from fantasy for a little bit. I've never seen such bogus play calling, refereeing at the end of a game. In the end of regulation, I don't know if you were tuning in or not, Brandon, but the Seahawks go to spike the ball, but DK clearly makes a catch and a play after the catch and is clearly in bounds and doesn't run out of bounds. It's a error on DK Metcalf's part, not running out of bounds. And
right.
the clock continues to go and they have to run to the line and snap the ball. But the refs call a review to see if DK's catch was even a catch, but it was blatantly a catch. And I feel like the refereeing in that game was stupid. It almost cost the Steelers the game. Luckily, Chris.
Well, you're just saying that as a Steelers fan,
No, Brandon, it was one of the worst officiating moments I've ever seen. I've never seen the refs stop the clock when a player intentionally stays in bounds. I've never seen that. It was clearly
yeah.
It felt like a gimme in my opinion. That did have fantasy implications. I did need Chase Claypool to get a walk-off touchdown for me to win my fantasy league. So sending it to OT kind of gave me that hope. But then when they set up for the field goal instead of going for the TD, I knew my week was over. Unless Dawson Knox somehow gets -0.6 tonight, it's not looking good for me. But
I'm hoping he doesn't, because I'm winning comfortably in one of my other leagues. But I do have Dawson Knox. I do hope that he does at least push it a little bit, because I still have a couple players left. Now, I'm actually facing Sam. Yeah. Sam, I hope he doesn't have any. I think he only has a defense left, if I remember correctly. So I should be chilling on that end. But
let's look at another guy. I was praying for a Chase Claypool walk-off TD. Let's look at a boom player, and then we can go into whether it's news or noise CeeDee Lamb gets a walk-off touchdown. This guy put up 149 yards and 2 touchdowns in his performance against the New England Patriots. Brandon, is this news or is it noise? Is CeeDee Lamb the guy? What happened to Amari Cooper? Break it down for me with your take on all this.
I mean, it's interesting because the Patriots invested a lot. I mean, they invested a lot heavily in free agency this year, but they invested a lot into their secondary as well. And it was just interesting seeing how, I mean, not just this week, but throughout the other weeks, that secondary is kind of getting a little bit torn apart. Where's CeeDee Lamb? I mean, with this Cowboys offense, it seems like it's a very spread offense. It doesn't seem like one receiver is a number one guy. I mean, one week it'll be Dallas Schultz, another week it'll be Amari Cooper. This week it just
Michael Gallup maybe come back off of IR soon.
Right,
that could have a big impact on that as well.
Exactly. I mean, Zeke is now not fumbling as much, so the running game is there. Dak is looking very impressive. He's, I think, possibly in MVP talks. I think it just depends on your week. You're still going to get the ball targeted to you, but CeeDee Lamb was just able to get open and get those catches.
Is that detrimental for CeeDee Lamb's value? Like, is he going to have these crazy boom weeks? Like, is he going to be a Tyler Lockett player? By that, I mean, is he either going to drop 30 or 5? Is that what we're looking at CeeDee Lamb's output going forward in a fantasy perspective? Or is his floor high enough to be able to start him with no worries at all?
I think with this Dallas team, I think the only one really safe is Zeke because he's going to get those ground touches. He's going to get those touches on running plays. They're not really utilizing him as a receiving running back, which I think he could be really good at. I think he's more so. I think they're still using him a lot more in the running game than anything. With anyone else, I think the value is going to be a little bit iffy. I think so going into any other week, but it's just going to have to depend on matchup. It's just going to have to depend on whether or not you feel comfortable starting a Dallas player. Like, for example, I chose to take out Dallas Schultz over Dawson Knox because I mean the matchup for me, Buffalo against Tennessee, but
Schultz did end up grabbing a TD.
He did,
which is
so
what you look
hoping
for
Dawson
in tight ends if they're not the elite 3. You look for a TD and 40 yards max. Like, I mean, the weapons that the Dallas Cowboys have are crazy. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think we could say the same thing with the Bucks. A team like that, you have so many weapons. It's just
Antonio Brown is the wide receiver 1 right now.
I know, and it's pissing me off because I have Chris Godwin. So.
And their schedule. Speaking of the Bucks, their schedule looks increasingly easier for wide receivers moving forward. So having a guy like Chris Godwin could be a nice buy low target. I know Brandon is a Chris Godwin owner, so I don't recommend shipping him off just anytime soon. I definitely see some upside. I drafted Chris Godwin in the 2nd round last year. I know it was a big mistake, but after what he did with Jameis, you can understand why I would think Tom Brady could do even better. Tom Brady didn't sling it as much as Jameis. All right. Jameis threw picks, but he threw a lot of TDs too. Tom plays to win. Jameis plays to have fun. No, I'm playing. Jameis, I love you. Go Knowles. But on a serious note, let's go back to another bust of the week, Brandon. Go ahead and give me this one.
So another bust of my week, I think we can clearly see in my background, and I think he's like clearly there, for example, Lamar Jackson. I mean, this guy, the Ravens still won convincingly, but it wasn't because of Lamar Jackson. 167 yards, 1 TD, 2 touchdowns, only 51 rushing yards.
Two interceptions. Two
interceptions, I should say. 1 TD, 2 interceptions. I mean, listen, if it was flipped, I would, he would probably, not be on this list. But again, we just go back to how Lamar is struggling to get this offense flowing. I mean, the Ravens really relied, I think, a lot on their defense in the game against the Chargers, really shutting Justin Herbert and that offense down. But I got to tell you, Lamar
Brandon,
it had issues.
I took the over in that game in an 8-team parlay, and that was the only thing I missed. I would have made several I would have made a good amount of money if the over hit
All
on that
right, all
game.
right.
But with all honesty, I don't know who to blame. Is it the Baltimore defense or the lack of Chargers offense? We can also look at the Chargers as a whole as a bust this season for fantasy, this week for fantasy. My apologies. Um, it just wasn't smart. It just wasn't good football. Like they didn't compete at all, and it's not what we all expected. I expected to see the Browns Chargers game of last week, 45 to 40 something, and then we end up not even hitting
Right.
the over on that, and that's what stops us. It was a heartbreaker, but that's my bust of the week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. Listen, it's. I mean, for you, I mean, the parlay should have hit, but
It should
I
have
gotta
hit,
tell you,
man.
I gotta tell you though. I mean, this is, I guess, the Ravens still look good regardless. I mean, but at the same time, you have to wonder whether or not moving forward can the Ravens really rely on Lamar. I mean, I know this could be just maybe too overblown or whatever the case is, and that's totally fine. And we're just thinking way too much into this. But I think at some point we have to look at uh his accuracy. We have to look at, if he can't beat him on the ground, what does he offer as a quarterback? And if the RPO isn't there, then I think it's going to be a little bit of an issue for a guy like Lamar to really take off and do anything.
Definitely, definitely. And if you guys are in chat right now, I would appreciate everybody to tune in and contribute to the banter. Let us know who your biggest boom of the week was on your fantasy team and who the biggest bust was. For me, my biggest bust was Kareem Hunt moving into this week. I could focus a little more on Lamar Jackson too, because I also had Lamar Jackson. All right, I started both of these guys and I'm losing by 0.6 in my league, and I can't blame anybody else but them. No, I get a 17.8 projection in a standard league for
Yeah.
Kareem Hunt, and the guy puts up 7 points for me. That's inexcusable. I get a 22 plus point projection for Lamar, and he drops 11. It's inexcusable. These two players were busts of the week. Don't sell them just yet. I mean, Kareem Hunt's hurt, so you may want to go pick up Dearness Johnson as a little handcuff moving forward in the waiver wire this week if you do. Want a player like that, because we don't know Nick Chubb's certainty moving forward with his injury that he was dealing with last week. And Dearness Johnson could be a nice pickup moving forward. So make sure to stay tuned later in the episode when we drop our people that you should be picking up right now. But Brandon, dive into Kareem Hunt a little bit. I mean, 66 yards, 12 receiving yards, and that's it.
I mean, look, I feel bad just because, listen, Kareem Hunt, I think should have went off this week. I know they're playing. I know they're playing a decent defense in the Cardinals defense this week. Chandler Jones, J.J. Watt, Isaiah Simmons, Buda Baker. He still should have had more yards. I 100% think he should have had more yards, especially with Nick Chubb injured. I mean, to be fair, the Browns offense couldn't get going at all. So maybe it's not so much in part of him. It could have been the offense as a whole. But Carolina goes to what? Not Carolina. Cardinals go to 6-0.
Yeah.
I mean, the Browns didn't really put up that much offense at all. I mean, they didn't score in the second half at all. They put up all the points in the second quarter.
You know why, right?
Because of the touch. There was one Hail Mary that I remember.
Because the Browns is the Browns.
Okay.
Sorry, Juju. I had to.
I mean,
but on a serious note, the Browns
Baker's
do look
numbers.
good. The Browns do look good. Baker almost got really hurt last game. He came back into the game, and then after in the post-game presser, he was like, "My shoulder still really hurts." I didn't.
I mean, he's playing.
I'm pretty sure they popped it back into it. I'm not sure. I don't know all the medical stuff that happened specifically with that, but I think his shoulder popped out and they popped it in, if I am correct.
But if you look at, Kareem Hunt's numbers, he should have had more. I mean, receiving wise, again, he should have had more coming out that backfield.
He's one of the best.
I think the offense could have going in this. Yeah,
him and Eckler are two of the best pass catching running backs in the NFL. I genuinely believe that, and I feel like he should have had an Eckler-esque week, Eckler value week. He should have been right there with them, and didn't turn out that way. You know what I'm saying?
No, I mean, to be fair, the offense in the second half, I mean, throughout the majority of the game, but in the second half, just couldn't get it going. So
Let's
maybe it's the
focus.
offense, maybe it was him, but
Let's
I think it's
focus
a
on a
combination
guy.
of the two.
Let's focus on a guy now. We have two more boom players remaining for you guys. So again, let us know in the comments who your biggest boom player was for you this week, and if they helped you win your fantasy week. We're going with the man, the myth, the legend, Kirk Cousins out of the Minnesota Vikings. You like that, and he did like that. He had 373 yards, 3 touchdowns. Great performance from Kirk Cousins, one of the highest scoring quarterbacks this week, with a bunch of lull weeks for a lot of QBs. Kirk Cousins definitely is a top fantasy guy. I don't know what to say. Moving forwards, I definitely believe we should look at Kirk Cousins with the potential to be a top guy, top 10 play every week. Dalvin Cook's back, makes the offense the flow a lot better. And when that run game's flowing, we already know that Kirk Cousins has some of the most elite and amazing weapons at wide receiver. You've got Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, and Tyler Conklin playing amazing at tight end as well. So these pass catchers are definitely helping Kirk Cousins elevate his not only real game, but his fantasy game as well. And that's definitely a top 10, waiver pickup moving forwards. This guy is probably one of the best streaming options you can do at QB if you don't have one of the top guys.
And I mean, listen, I gave Ben some, in our latest banter battles, we went, CeeDee Lamb, not CeeDee Lamb, I should say, Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. And I said,
not
Kirk Cousins.
not a little plug to shout out that you officially won again. You're back on the throne.
I'm back on the throne. Just a little dig at Ben. I know who's watching.
Make sure to tune in Fridays at 4 p.m. guys. The banter show and the banter battle on the banter show is amazing, and I definitely recommend it. So subscribe and hit that notification bell to make sure to stay tuned for Fridays at 4 p.m. just as the morning after this show, Mondays at 11.
Yeah, you definitely stay tuned because especially last week's got heated, so they're really fun. But getting back on Kirk Cousins, I think with Kirk, it depends. Like he's gonna have weeks where he looks like, why the hell did the Vikings give him $80 million guaranteed? And then he looks like, oh, this is why the Vikings gave him 80. There's like,
you like that, there's some you like.
And then sometimes there's a middle ground. Like he's all over the place. He's not, and not to say he's a bad quarterback, but for what
inconsistent.
He's just inconsistent. Exactly. Thank you. And I think, with Kirk Cousins this week, he really went off. He played a fantastic game. I had Thielen in another league, so I definitely reaped those rewards for the fact that Cousins actually played a great. He usually targets Thielen a lot anyway, so Thielen does do well for me, but Thielen went off for like 17, 18 points for me. But beating a Carolina team that I think honestly has had some difficulties on the defensive end. I think they were probably one of the worst 3-0 teams going into week 4, in my opinion, because of just who they played beforehand. But the Vikings are slowly coming back after a slow start. And they're looking really good too, beating the Panthers in overtime. But, I think for the Vikings, I think with Kirk Cousins, if he can maintain this level of play throughout the whole week, I think then throughout week after week, I think then the Vikings have a shot in that division. But
for me, this game, the Vikings Panthers game was the game of the week. I wanted to highlight the Steelers game. I already did that, so I'm not going to make that the game of the week just because the Steelers won. This game was interesting. There was like a 4% win probability for the Carolina Panthers at one point, and they came down and stopped them and scored with hardly any time left to force overtime. And those stories are obviously some of the best. We can also look at the Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb's walk-off against New England. Obviously one of the craziest games of the week, probably the game of the week. But these two are my two options. If you had to choose one, Brandon, between the two, which one would it be?
Between this game,
decide the banter broadcast, the morning after's game of the week. I gave you
between
2.
this
Between
week, I mean, to be fair, I mean, we titled it. I mean, the Dallas game. I mean, you
Mhm.
kind of maybe have to throw in there too, Dallas and Patriots, because I know that went back and forth late. The game of the week. Yeah, you can highlight the Steelers versus Seahawks, but this game went into overtime. The Vikings versus Carolina game. You know, Minnesota. Played really well in that second
Minnesota
half.
choked. Minnesota choked
It
in the fourth
it
quarter. They should not have
That's
went to
true.
overtime.
They should. I mean, Carolina went. I mean, scored 11, and Minnesota only had a field goal.
Mhm.
But Minnesota was able. I'm gonna have to give it to Minnesota just because of the level of performance like everyone had. I think across the board in that game.
It was an
You
all-around
know,
game, no questions
yeah,
asked, and then Sam Darnold ramped it up in the fourth quarter. Finally got Robbie Anderson in the end zone. Um, I mean, the guy was non-existent in fantasy, but it was definitely a really, really good game. Let's move on to our last boom player, Darryl Williams, 89 yards, 2 TDs. We don't need to stay on this too much. The guy's the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. You have him on fantasy. If you have him, he's a blessing. Enjoy him moving forwards. He's a must-start play. But let's move on to the MVT, the most valuable turfer. If you guys don't know what a turfer is, it is our community. If you are a turfer, you are part of the band turf community. And we are giving this weekly award moving forward for the most valuable turfer. And this week, Brandon, give us a proper introduction to who won the award.
So this guy, which he saved me in fantasy last week. Ben knows who I'm talking about. I'm sure maybe you guys know who I'm talking about too. Who saved me in fantasy last week. He had an incredible. I mean, yes, he went up against the Texans this week, so not the best defense, but he still had an incredible week this week as well. 145 yards, 2 DDs. I'm talking about Jonathan Taylor, running back for the Colts. I think he went off this week. He had 27 points. Last week, he probably would have been my turf of the week last week too, just because he did save me last week as well from losing to Ben. But 27 points this week. I'm just looking at his scoring summary now. Did really well. Back-to-back 25 plus games. Last week against Baltimore. This week against Houston. He was dominant throughout that whole game. Didn't have to really carry the ball a lot, but he also didn't have to do it too much. So the productivity still was really high, and he had a fantastic game.
Yeah. I mean, you can't put it any better than you did. Jonathan Taylor was phenomenal. There's no questions asked. This guy was a first round running back. I did give him some hate at the beginning of the year. I didn't think he should be drafted above some of the guys like Eckler and Antonio Gibson. Eckler, I was right. Antonio Gibson, I was wrong. What can you do? But Jonathan Taylor has proven to be that guy. And credit to him for being the morning after's first most valuable turfer. We hope to see him again on this list in the future. And we hope to see you guys again in this chat every week. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Brandon, let's move on to our top 3 waiver targets, and we can finish with the football banter. We could just run through these. I mean, if you want to go ahead and start, you can. If not, I could take it away.
No, you go ahead. You take it.
All right. So we've got Donovan Peoples-Jones out of the Cleveland Browns. Odell Beckham Jr. hasn't been that guy for this team, and we've been looking for somebody to really step up and be that wide receiver that Baker Mayfield can rely on. And it hasn't been OBJ. Jarvis has on IR, maybe coming back soon. Could be one of those guys. But for the time being, it's Donovan Peoples-Jones. Last week, it was David Njoku. This week, it's Donovan Peoples-Jones. This guy's a target machine. He had a bunch of touchdowns, a bunch of targets. And guess what? He's available in 99% of leagues. So there's no excuse for you to say, oh, he's already rostered. Go out and get the man. I wouldn't use your number 1 pick on him, but if you need a position of need, go out and get that. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a sneaky boom or bust play guy week in and week out moving forwards. He could easily replicate this again. I just see the opportunity being there nonstop for him moving forwards.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this week, yesterday, I should say, what 101 yards for the Browns last yesterday. So he's definitely being targeted a lot more.
The
Maybe it could have just
opportunity.
been this. Yeah, it was the opportunity. Maybe it could have been just this week for the Browns, just given that Kareem Hunt and didn't go off and Nick Chubb was injured, but Donovan Peoples-Jones could 2 TDs as well. 4 receptions, only 100 and 101 yards. That's really good. Odell's not really being targeted a lot. Still coming back from that ACL injury, so
Mhm.
possibly as a reason why. We haven't seen a lot of Jarvis Landry. I'm not sure if he's injured or
He's
not.
yeah, he's
Um,
currently on IR designation.
okay. So, and honestly, right now, the Browns are not really targeting any Njoku or Austin Hooper.
I mean,
So
after last week's Joku 100-yard game, it's hard to say that they're not targeting Joku. I feel like he's also a sneaky tight end pickup for players if they want to potentially boom one week. Because I mean, if you don't have a good tight end, the floor for tight ends is very low.
right.
And if you want a high boom player, David Joku is that guy. But moving forwards to our next waiver wire out of the week, Kenyon Drake, available in 57% of leagues. If you're not rostering him, you're doing something wrong. Even with Josh Jacobs yesterday, Kenyon Drake put on a show, showed his ability in the passing game, really carving out his role in this offense. We haven't found his role in this offense yet. With a lot of question marks with the Las Vegas Raiders moving forwards, I feel like Kenyon Drake is not one of them. He clearly showed that he is that pass catching running back in this system, and Josh Jacobs is the goal line push it in guy. But at the same time, Kenyon Drake has always showed big play, boom potential, kind of like Miles Sanders. And
Right.
he is definitely a guy you should go out and target. 57% of leagues. That's crazy for a guy who just 2 years ago was a must own in fantasy football.
Yeah, I mean, this was his really coming out game. He had 19 points this week, uh, two
With
TDs
Jacobs healthy, that's important.
with, yeah,
That's
I
what
know,
we're,
but
yeah.
but even when Jacob wasn't, the only reason why I'm skeptical with this because even when Jacob was week to week, um, the Raiders didn't really target him or utilize him as
This
much.
is this is what I'm saying now though, is that now that he's
Okay,
not week to week, now that Jacob's not week to week, his role is solidified. He doesn't need to be bouncing and changing what he does. He's doing what he's doing and he's specifying and specializing in just that. And it definitely gives Derek Carr another weapon that I don't think Josh Jacobs provides. So that speed and burst off of the pass catching play, that yards after catch that Kenyon Drake's going to provide is going to boost his fantasy production moving forward. It's definitely a guy I think everybody should be targeting. Brandon, am I crazy to think this last player is a waiver wire ad of the week?
it depends on what league you are because I mean,
Tell me.
uh, so if I think honestly, if you're in just uh, a regular everybody's gonna hate me for saying this in a regular fantasy football league. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna really like look at this guy's possibly a starting quarterback, but in our dynasty league, Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, yes, did not have a great game. He did have a great game. Yes, the Dolphins did lose, but he did throw for over 300 yards for 2 TDs and 1 interception. He is on the waiver list right at the moment. He is a player trending up. If you haven't really picked him up yet, I would go ahead and do so. He's available in 75% of the leagues on Sleeper. Honestly, even if you're not in dynasty, I think moving forward, the Dolphins didn't have a lot of offensive weapons for him yesterday. So a lot of throws to Gesicki, Smythe, and a few other targets that he wouldn't usually go after.
Mm-hmm.
Devontae Parker wasn't there for him, and some
Jalen
other
Waddle stepped up huge. I feel
Jalen
like
Waddle.
that
I gotta
that
say,
connection gives some fantasy value to Tua,
Sam
right?
gave him a lot of Sam gave the Dolphins a lot of stick for taking Jalen Waddle over
Devontae,
what's his name
Devontae Smith.
Devontae Smith. But I gotta say, it's looking like it's a good option for Tua at the moment. He played really well, and he has been playing really well, whether it's Brissett or Tua. I just gotta say, I think Tua moving forward. You got to also take a look at the rest of the schedule for him. I think, I think now is sort of his coming out party in the sense of I think now he's coming off that rib injury. I think now he's going to really try to bounce back and really move forward and try to really progress his game even forward. He's playing
He
Atlanta
hears the
next week, so
haters. He hears the doubters, Brandon. He wants to prove everybody that he
yeah,
is the QB in Miami moving forwards. Although they lost to the sorry Jags that haven't won a game in over a season, the Jags still haven't won a game in the United States of America. All right. I don't want to hear it.
it
This
takes
was
them
in
going to
London.
London.
Yeah.
It takes them going to London.
If you want to do it in the US of A. Okay. All right. Do that, and then we'll see if the Jags can move forward. No, but seriously, tragic way to lose for the Miami Dolphins. I was watching the game at 9:30 with a Dolphins fan, Jake Tickner. Sorry, it was a tough watch, but it happens. Tua's a interesting streaming QB option in 25% of leagues. If you do have some injuries or you do have some doubts on your squad moving forwards, I definitely recommend looking at this guy. It is only 75% of leagues, so it is a guy that is rostered in the majority of leagues. But if he's not in yours, I would look to do it ASAP. With that being said, Brandon, that is going to wrap it up for the football portion of the show. Take us into a little bit about what the next part is going to look like.
All right, so tomorrow, hopefully if I get the video edited and all that, tomorrow I will be posting our dynasty fantasy basketball draft, my perspective of it. So you guys will be seeing my takes, who I chose, what I thought of who was getting taken, some of my fantasy advice. So it's like a cool concept where you guys will watch me draft, go through my thought process throughout the draft, as well as also seeing what I thought of Jonathan's teams, Ben's teams, and Sam's teams as well, because they were also in that draft, and also some fantasy advice as well. So if you're about to start off your fantasy basketball league, definitely go ahead and check out that video. It's going to drop tomorrow. Just got to finish editing it, and it'll be tomorrow.
Tomorrow, the fantasy basketball season officially starts. I mean, we have an NBA basketball set of games. We have the Warriors and the Lakers, I believe, and then the Nets and the Bucks. Nets Bucks is probably first. We usually do West Coast after. So that is a really good set of games. And moving forwards, fantasy basketball is going to be one of my priorities because, as Brandon said, I had some interesting techniques. You can go see those on his video tomorrow. But I did do some crazy stuff. I had the 10th overall pick in a 12-man dynasty league in the game pick sleeper format, as you guys know or don't. Game pick is a way to make fantasy basketball more like fantasy football. You choose one game a week per player, and it definitely makes it more interesting, more even, I feel like, than it ever has been before. So I highly recommend it. If you want to start a fantasy basketball league, do that. And Brandon, why did Steph Curry fall to me at 10? What is that? What is the disrespect to Steph Curry?
I mean, just a little bit of a spoiler. Yeah. So Jonathan did take Steph Curry at 10. To be fair, you look throughout the whole draft, and a lot of players were getting reached on. A lot of young players were, all right.
Who was the biggest reach you saw that was like, oh God?
I mean, there were some from my end. But I think early rounds, just taking a look, just trying to go through some of the early rounds. I think Beal was taken in the first round, which was really interesting to me. I had him projected going at my
mid-second
mid-second round. I thought I was going to be able to scoop him up. I thought Embiid in the first round was kind of interesting as well. But I think, I mean, I did kind of reach on a couple. I mean, I took D'Angelo Russell in the 4th round, but I figured he was the best point guard available at the time, or young point guard available at the time. So I figured, why not take him? I thought what was really interesting, I think the biggest reach overall, though, I think came from when I think someone took Tyler Hero in the 5th round. I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of going through the recording now. I think someone took Tyler Hero in the 5th round. And I was very confused as to why, because I projected him going in 6th, 7th, maybe even 8th in our league, and he fell and he just was taken with 5th pick. I mean, I know 5th round. I know it's like I know it's a league where you kind of in a dynasty league you want to take your young players and you want to make sure you grab them, so you take them no matter what. But it was just interesting to see because he's having a tremendous preseason. So kind of maybe that reach there a little bit was a little off catching, not off putting, but like a little like caught my eye as like one that was like very interesting.
As Jaren Jackson just gets an extension, probably makes his
It gets
value
a
go even higher.
massive extension, exactly. But yeah,
You
I'm
know,
not
you know
sure.
what happened with my team, Brendan? I
Go
drafted
ahead.
players that would normally be drafted in the first round every year in Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons as my first picks. All right. Ben Simmons, we don't know what's going on. Kyrie, we don't know what's going on. Kawhi Leonard out for the year. I also have Klay Thompson too, guys. I drafted big name value moving forward. It is a league where we only start 7 players. We have a starting 5 and then 2 util spots. So imagine my squad when fully healthy. It's gonna be. I mean, I have 2 top 5 players, arguably, right? We have Curry and Davis. Would you argue they're still both top 5?
Yeah, I mean, listen, your team depends on health, and right now, what's going on with Kyrie and Ben Simmons? Like, let's be
Mm-hmm.
real. Your team is going. I mean, because then afterwards, and I kind of commented, you kind of started going young, and you started going, for future value as well. Which I thought was good. You got your veterans in early, then you were like, all right, let me go ahead and get them. But the veterans you got in,
Anthony
Clay's gonna,
Davis and Steph Curry, whose ankles are made of
yeah,
glass.
Davis, who's injury prone, Curry that can miss a couple games throughout the whole season, Kawhi who can't practice till
He
March,
might miss the
April at the
season. Yeah.
earliest. He might miss the whole season at this point. Clay, who I think at this point is clear for full contact practice, but is not going to be available to January.
2
You
Warriors.
have 2 Warriors. You have Ben Simmons, who we don't know what's going on in Philadelphia, whether or not he's going to play or not. Same thing with Kyrie in that situation over there in Brooklyn. So you have some interesting guys that maybe not this season,
In the
but the
future, I have
follow in the
if we drafted next
future.
year, I might have like 4 of the first round guys
Yeah,
in Kawhi,
exactly.
Davis, Curry, and maybe even Kyrie if he finds himself in a new situation and playing. He might even be traded this season, and that would
That's
be
true.
crazy value for me too. It's such a late round, like the 5th. I believe I drafted Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, to be fair, he was on the board for a while because I think everyone was scared to take him. I was just waiting for someone to
me.
take yeah.
I volunteered as tribute. There's not much you can do. If a guy like Kyrie's there and in the 5th round, I wasn't really too happy with any of the guys, and Kyrie's there, I'm gonna take Kyrie. Like I
Yeah.
rather wait on it. And I did have the 10th pick, so I was able to get like one of the best waiver picks, and I got Kyle Anderson, who's one of the best guys on the waivers for some reason undrafted.
I mean, to be fair, 12 rounds, there's going to be not slim pickings, but there's going to be some guys that,
It
you
is
know,
slim pickings right now. You look at the
yeah,
waiver wire,
yeah,
it's slim pickings. 12-man league, and we did a bunch of bench spots and taxi slots and you name it. But my taxi squad is actually pretty interesting. I want you to break it down for me. I actually did a trade. Let's dive into that last night. Um, I did a trade. I want to get your thoughts on it. It was Jordan Clarkson and Killian Hayes for Derrick Rose and Josh Giddey. Who wins this trade in your opinion? And was it worth it for me to dive into that?
So you got Jordan Clarkson and Killian Hayes,
Yes.
right? Listen, I rate Josh Giddey a lot. I think he's definitely gonna. I think coming out of Australia, he was definitely a high prospect. I think he's definitely a prospect to look at for the Thunder's long-term plans. Derrick Rose, I mean, he's going to be sharing time with Emmanuel quickly at that guard role. Emmanuel Quickly, Kemba,
Yeah, there's a lot
Evan
of
Fournier,
questions moving with
Alec
that.
Burks. I mean, so that guard role is that guard position in New York is very, very interesting.
Saturated.
Saturated. Killian Hayes, I think he has a lot to prove this season. He didn't play really that well last year. I know he was coming off injury, but he didn't play that well. But uh, in a young Detroit team that now has Cade Cunningham and having guys like Sadiq Bey, Jeremy Grant, Isaiah Stewart, Luke Garza as well, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And also having his backup being Corey Joseph. I think that's I think with him, that's an experiment pick at whether or not he does well. I think it's going to
But
be.
listen, Derrick Rose was my last round
No.
pick.
I mean, you got value. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the big here you got Jordan Clarkson. I think
I
that
went
was a
from
tremendous
Derrick
pickup.
Rose to Jordan Clarkson, and then I
Yeah,
downgraded from Josh Giddey to Killian Hayes. But
yeah,
is
exactly.
Killian Hayes really even that much of a downgrade? The guy was a top 7 pick for the Detroit Pistons last year, I believe, and
Yeah, I mean, he spent
he's
a lot
still
of time
got a
with
lot of potential.
injury.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does have good potential. I would be concerned with him. Jordan Clarkson, I mean, what he won Sixth Man of the Year last
Yeah,
year. Donovan Mitchell. I mean, he's going to be backing up Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell. So he's definitely going to get a lot of game time minutes. I would probably project possibly 30 this year, 30 minutes coming off the bench.
good minutes.
Yeah,
Those are some good
so
minutes.
that is some good. So he definitely is going to gain you some starter points. It's
And I
just
told you
as of
guys,
whether or not match
if you
up.
were paying attention to my team, I got a poverty franchise right now with Kawhi, Clay, and Kyrie all on my IR.
Yeah.
So I need all the help I can get. I was lucky to get Kyle Anderson. I'm starting him, starting the waiver wire out of the week. In the chat, Claviceps says Jordan Clarkson played twice as many games as D Rose last season and the exact same minutes per game, 6 Man of the Year award. I mean, Jordan Clarkson is a bucket off the bench. I feel like he's the Lou Williams of the future. And he's going to win many more 6 Man of the Years unless Tyler Hero pushes him out of the race. It's possible.
I mean, listen, Jordan Clark. To be fair, I think picking up Jordan Clarkson for Josh Giddey and Derrick Rose. Well, yes, right now I think we don't know what Josh Giddey is going to perform, and I think Derrick Rose. Obviously, we've seen better days from him, and I think that's just a loaded backcourt. I think Jordan Clarkson. I think you got good value for what you gave up.
100%, 100%. And for everybody tuning in to the show this week, we appreciate you immensely. This has been the first ever episode of The Morning After, brought to you by the Banter Broadcast. As always, and as it always will be moving forwards, I am your host, Jonathan Silber, joined by my co-host, Brandon Holkman, and we will see you on the next one. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. See you later, Banter.